Talladega. The track where careers get made, records get broken, and in about 3 seconds flat, 26 race cars can turn into nothing but smoke, sparks, and a tow truck lineup that stretches halfway down pit road. That is exactly what happened on lap 115 of the Cup race, and the name that ended up in the center of all of it was Bubba Wallace. Leading the field one moment, watching his race die in a cloud of destruction the next. And then, before the rubber even stopped burning on the asphalt, the internet had already decided who the villain was. But here is the thing. The deeper you actually go into this one, the messier it gets. And the version being screamed on social media and the version the drivers told in the garage are not even close to the same story. So let us go back to the beginning, because the race before the wreck actually matters to understanding why the wreck happened at all. Talladega did not start as a demolition derby. NASCAR had stretched stage 1 all the way out to 98 laps specifically to reduce the fuel mileage chess match, but the opening segment still played out with manufacturer strategy, green flag pit cycles, and drivers being careful not to burn their race down in the first half. Brian Scott won stage 1. Ford was dominant at the top. Bubba Wallace was in the mix but had nothing major to show for it yet. Then stage 2 started. And the entire personality of the race changed in almost no time at all. The patience was gone. The aggression came flooding in. The lanes got tighter. The pushes got harder. And this is precisely the thing that drivers have been warning NASCAR about for months with this current superspeedway package. The field goes from cautious and calculated to fully committed and dangerously unstable in what feels like the blink of an eye. And when that happens at Talladega, where 40 cars are running inches apart at nearly 200 miles per hour, there is almost no margin left for anything to go wrong before everything goes wrong all at once. Lap 115. It finally blew up. Official NASCAR coverage described the sequence clearly. Race leader Bubba Wallace received a strong bump from Ross Chastain coming off the backstretch. That shove pushed the number 23 car sideways toward the outside wall. Cole Custer had to react instantly. The 3-wide pack that had been running right behind him collapsed into itself, and suddenly turn 3 was just a wall of smoke and shredded race cars with nowhere to go and no time to avoid any of it. 26 of the 40 cars in the field got collected. That is more than half the garage. In terms of sheer scale, this was one of the largest crashes in Cup racing in recent memory. Ryan Preece, Joey Logano, Kyle Larson, Brad Keselowski, Ty Gibbs, William Byron, Bubba Wallace himself, and a long list of others either had their day ended completely or had their cars wrecked beyond any realistic hope of competing for a win. The red flag came out. The race stopped. And in that silence, before a single driver had even climbed out of their car, social media had already started building its case. Now here is the honest truth about why Bubba Wallace ends up at the center of these conversations every single time something like this happens. It is not always fair. It is not always logical. But it is real, and pretending otherwise does not help anyone understand what actually occurred. One side looked at the replay and said Ross Chastain flat out shoved the 23 car into disaster. The contact was there. The force was undeniable. Wallace did not just spin from clean air on his own. He was hit. Hard. And anyone being objective about the footage has to acknowledge that. But the other side looked at the exact same replay and said Bubba was moving around too aggressively at the front, made a late block, and put himself in a position where even a small amount of contact was always going to end catastrophically. And that side of the argument has some validity too. When you are leading at Talladega in stage 2 with the entire field stacked up right behind you and the aggression already at maximum, the decisions you make at the front carry consequences for everyone behind you. That is just the reality of running where he was running. So this is not one of those easy Talladega incidents where everybody shrugs, calls it a racing deal, and moves on by Tuesday. This one had a familiar lightning rod at the center of it, the carnage was brutal and visible to millions, and the arguments on both sides had just enough real evidence to keep fighting each other indefinitely. The race did eventually continue. Carson Hocevar survived the chaos, kept his car clean, and took the win in a 3-lap shootout at the end, beating Chris Buescher by 0.114 seconds for his first Cup Series victory. Genuinely great story. Deserved celebration. But if we are being completely honest, the emotional center of the entire afternoon was that wreck and everything that came out of it afterward. Now let us talk about what Bubba actually said. Because his reaction was not the simple clean apology or the aggressive blame shift that either side of the internet wanted it to be. On team radio, coming out of the car, the tone reportedly leaned toward Chastain. The quote that got traction was 2 words, "They wrecked us." That is the raw, immediate, in-the-moment reaction of a driver who felt a shove from behind destroy his race. Completely understandable as a human reaction. Not particularly helpful as a public statement when half the field is sitting in the garage with destroyed equipment. Then he got to the TV interview, and the tone shifted noticeably. He said he hated it for Xfinity, hated it for the team, said they had to figure out how to be pushed better, and added that he takes responsibility on that. He acknowledged the DNF. He talked about debriefing and improving. And in the longer media center version, he described his car as unstable getting pushed and said the hard hit was maybe too much, and unfortunately they wiped out a bunch of cars. That is an adult, measured response. He did take some accountability publicly. He did not go into full deflection mode. But the reason a significant portion of fans on X still went after him is because the framing felt too technical to too many people. The line about figuring out how to be pushed better read to some as spreading the blame to the car and the package rather than simply saying the block failed and that is on me. And because his radio reaction sounded angrier and more blame-oriented than his camera reaction, the idea that he was adjusting his message depending on who was listening fed the frustration even further. And then came the Fox situation, which added a completely different layer to the already chaotic narrative. According to reporting after the race, Bubba's very first words to reporter Jamie Little were a sarcastic comment about dozing off waiting for the interview after a long delay before she reached him. Jamie Little acknowledged the wait and apologized. But when Fox later posted that interview clip on social media, that opening exchange was missing. The posted version started after the sharpest line had already been cut out. And that is where Fox deserved real criticism. Maybe it was routine editing for length. Maybe it was just sloppy social media work done quickly. But when viewers can clearly see that the clip begins after the most uncomfortable part of the moment, it looks exactly like the network chose the cleaner, safer version to put in front of the audience. And given that fans were already furious about the broadcast for drowning the actual race in commercial breaks, the decision made Fox look significantly worse than it needed to. If you are going to air the interview, air the whole interview. Do not smooth the rough edges and then act surprised when people notice. The drivers, though, brought something the social media mob almost never brings to these moments. Context. Ryan Preece, who was collected in the wreck and had every reason to be angry, did not go after Bubba at all. He said it felt like everyone was just pinballing off each other, that there was no single person to blame, and that the car being as unstable as it is means one bad push eventually turns someone and takes everyone with them. That is not a man calling out Bubba Wallace. That is a driver pointing directly at the package itself as the fundamental problem. Joey Logano was even more direct about it. He basically said the situation forces drivers to choose between saving fuel or crashing, that the round bumpers make the cars unstable, and that until the package gets fixed, scenes like lap 115 are going to keep happening. That quote matters enormously because it completely reframes the whole conversation. It takes it out of the simple Bubba versus Ross blame game and puts it exactly where several drivers and team executives have been pointing for months. The current superspeedway product is a powder keg. The only question at every single race is which lap and which driver happened to be standing closest when it finally goes off. Kyle Larson said something similar but softer, noting that the race went from more saving than expected in Stage 1 to far more intensity in Stage 2 and that he did not know where the middle ground was supposed to be. That fits perfectly with the broader frustration inside the garage about these events. They are stuck in an awkward space between fuel conservation theater and inevitable destruction once everyone starts pushing for real. So here is where all of it actually lands. Was Bubba Wallace at the center of the big one? Yes. Was he the visible trigger point in front of the field when it all came apart? Yes. Did 26 cars get collected and did a lot of fans blame him specifically? Absolutely yes. But if you actually listen to the drivers who were in it, and if you read the official sequence of events rather than just absorbing the loudest takes on social media, the full story is considerably more complicated than that. Ross Chastain's show started the chain reaction. Bubba's car got unstable under pressure. The field was already packed 3 and 4 wide with nowhere for any of it to go. And the superspeedway package turned what might have been a single car incident into a scene that wiped out more than half the field in about 2 seconds. That does not mean Bubba escapes criticism entirely. He was leading. He was making the decisions at the very front of the draft. He admitted his team needs to be better about how they handle being pushed. That is fair. But the cartoon version where one guy simply forgot how to drive and erased 25 other race teams is not what actually happened at Talladega. It never is. Talladega is never that clean or that simple. The internet wants a villain every single time. The garage almost always finds a system problem. After lap 115 of this race, both of those conversations got louder than they have been in a long time. And until NASCAR seriously addresses what this package actually produces at superspeedways, we are going to be having this exact conversation again. Just with a different name at the center of it.